Hey everybody, this is Miles from Living with Miles podcast, and I wanted to do a question and answer on management. This actually came out of a Human Resources Today episode I did where I was talking about financial wellness and how to talk about personal financial issues in the workplace, and understanding the morale impacts and the other things that go along with that, and how to open up that conversation so it can be a safe conversation while being a responsible one. And one of the questions that came out of that meeting was, I had talked about how much I care about my teams and how much I put a lot of effort and desire into figuring out how to get them to do really well. And team care is a big thing that's important to me. And the question was, how do we get more people like that? How do we encourage that inside our teams and inside our companies to be able to do this? Now, keep in mind, this is an HR audience, so they're very, very invested in good business practices and in wanting to bring the best culture and the best environment and really take care of the well-being of the employees. And that's their job. That's part of the forefront of what they've got going on. So it's a good question. And I gave an answer, but it was a short answer, and it was an incomplete answer at best. And so I thought I'd take the opportunity to put this out there, another stab at answering that question. So how do we cultivate managers that take an active interest in the well-being of their teams? And I think this is a really great question, but it's a loaded question. It comes with a couple of assumptions. First of all, it comes with the assumption that we want managers taking an active interest in the well-being of their teams in a holistic way, in a compassionate way, in a way that improves the overall engagement between an employee and their workplace. I'm hearing reports that millennials now want workplaces to be more friendly. They want them to be more social. They want them to be, they want to be more associated like a family rather than a business and a strict, this tyrannical environment. And the problem is it's really complicated, and there's a lot of factors that come into play here. So first thing, let's talk about why we're in the condition we're in. So why does a person become a manager? How does a person become a manager? In a lot of cases, a person becomes a manager. They don't go into school for management in a lot of cases, especially when you get to the frontline management guys. You get the guys that are in the trenches and are working with teams. In my experience, most of these people were originally an individual contributor in the field in which they're managing, and they were a top performer. They did really well. And the assumption was that by putting them in charge, that they would be able to maximize and leverage that to bring it to the broader team. So keep in mind that the person that's being put into the management position in their very first set is because they're good at something else, not managing. They're good at something else. They're good at what they will be managing, not management itself, which is an entirely different art form and an entirely different thing. And unless you have an organization that has a management training program, actively trains programs, the one that I love is Toyota. The Toyota Lean program, they will take their staff out. If you're going to become a manager, they take you out of the job. They give you 6 months of training on that. And then they put you in, and they don't even put you back in the same team that you were originally in. They put you in a new environment, so you go in day one fresh as a manager. That mitigates so many challenges that managers have to deal with right off the bat. It's really smart. Most of us can't afford to do that kind of thing. So what are we looking at? What challenges am I talking about? Well, first of all, you have the challenge of the job of being a manager is not the job of being an individual contributor. And the success that they had as an individual contributor is the success that they expect from themselves being a manager. But it doesn't work that way. The skill set is different. The priorities are different. The goals and aspirations are different. So when you have that, you automatically put someone into a position where they're going to be struggling and they're going to be challenged by their environment, which is going to put them in an unsafe space in their own head. Now, no one is really good at being compassionate and being emotionally intelligent and being cognitively aware of what their team needs from this really, really good solid place and this good secure part in themselves, unless they are secure in their new position, and they're not. They have to prove themselves. They're in a highly challenging environment. The expectations are not really generally clearly laid out. The environment is one of just get it done. I mean, we still have to do production. We still have deliverables we have to make. The accountability that generally exists on a manager is on the productivity of their team. And even then, productivity measures aren't really clear in a lot of times. It's do more. Well, how do you measure do more? So this is a challenging environment for a new manager to be in. And when whatever they come up with as a successful strategy to get them through to where they start seeing success, that's going to be their core skill set that they're going to cultivate. That's going to be the core skill set they're going to do. And when we're in a high stress, high anxiety environment, often we will go to more direct, more targeted, more focused, more results-oriented, not people-oriented paradigms. So if we want to cultivate a skill set in managers that is really dedicated to building teams and encouraging them to be better, we need to ensure that we're actually measuring against that. We're actually using that as one of the success criteria for new managers, so that as they are learning their strategies, often on their own, of how they're going to engage, that we add this as one of those mission critical and focused elements, because they're in a unsafe scenario. It's a new job. So it's a whole new set of responsibilities, a whole new set of expectations. We need to add to those expectations these cultural expectations that we want to see, and we need to make them just as important as the deliverable expectations, which we already have. So this is going to be, if we don't do this, I mean, we're already setting up where we have to retrain someone. And retraining is always harder than initial training. So there's that. Second thing, why did they become a manager again? Because they were good at what they used to do, which means the value paradigm of what they understand is very much focused on however they were successful in the first place. And the people that are truly successful in various works, especially in my field where we were talking about engineers and artists, the people that were truly gifted engineers and truly gifted artists often struggled in cases of human interaction. They often were very off-putting in conversation or were very challenged in social environments. Sometimes pride, sometimes confidence, sometimes, or not confidence, but there's a kind of expertise ego that comes in, where the aspect of being right is more important than getting along. And it's good that we have that. We need that in some cases, because absolutely in certain fields, in certain areas, that's absolutely true. But in management, that is not necessarily a winning strategy if our focus is on the well-being of teams. If our focus is on the well-being of our staff and on ensuring that they have meaning and that they have a level of that they have the environment they need in order to produce their best results. So we don't necessarily promote people into management on the basis of their human interaction skills. Now, a shrewd business leader will do so, and that's fair. But it's not enough to just identify that. It's also to cultivate it, because a manager has to balance. A frontline manager, the manager with direct reports that are actually producing results, they have to balance the needs of that individual team with the expectations of the delivery. And so needing to balance that, we need to identify as management candidates those that we be good at that skill set, rather than just looking at how do they produce as an individual contributor in that framework and then see what goes on from there. A third area of concern for me when I see people who get promoted into management or people who become managers is that often it is the only alternative progression path in a career. And so when you get people that, especially when you get to the higher levels, when you get to where we can't afford to have everybody be an architect, it's you have your highest level of talent because either there's the capability or we just have only so many spaces in that at that level that we can afford and we can maintain. So either way, often what I saw was it was the alternate path. You either go into this high individual contributor, high excellence, high expectation, high responsibility path, of which there are very, very few, and they're a very limited number of opportunities, or you go into management as the alternative. And if you're not going to have success in the individual contributor path, maybe the management path is the way to go. Now, again, notice that this is not selecting for qualities that are helpful in building the well-being of teams. So at the very onset, we don't select for those qualities which are really, really good in team building. And if we don't select for that, then our challenge of building that skill set is going to be even higher. So the first thing I would say is if you can get into there, when you're evaluating and when you're deciding who's going to be a manager, when you're going to promote someone into a role of manager, you're going to hire someone into a role of manager. Look for those qualities at the onset. It will make your life significantly easier because you don't necessarily have to train from zero or from a negative position. You can cultivate something that's already there. The Freemasons have a wonderful concept. Their idea is that they make good men better. And I love this concept when it comes to selecting for management roles, because what you're taking says, you want to cultivate making a good manager, a person who has the potential to be a good manager, better. If you look at it from that perspective, we start with an advantage. We start with someone who already has the traits, already has the criteria of being a good manager. And if you can look at that, then we need to identify what those skill sets are. They need to be compassionate. They need to have a caring, they need to have an invested care in the well-being of their team and the well-being of their staff, and an investiture of the productivity and the getting the product delivered. Often, profitability is directly tied to the latter. Long-term profitability, and there are studies that speak to this. Unfortunately, when you go and dig into those studies and you look at the details of those studies, they become a little less sensational than the headlines would lead you to believe. But there are studies that go and demonstrate that positivism, a healthy workplace, healthy environment, and things that focus on the well-being of your team produce more productivity. So it's there, but it's a long-term effect. It's something that needs to be measured long-term. And if your business environment is one that focuses only on short-term results, it's going to be hard to actually legitimize that sell. That sell really does require that focus, that area, that really does require long-term investment. And by long-term investment, I mean multiple years. So there's another thing that you need in order to make this happen is you need to have a long-term evaluation, and you need to measure based on that long-term evaluation. You need to monitor and measure both the elements that you think are going to add to productivity and the productivity that it actually does. And this is interesting because productivity measures are tricky. Productivity measures are usually poorly selected. My favorite is number of hours in the office. Now, the reason why I I find this to be a poor measure of productivity is because I found that when you reached and this is just a private study. I did this as a private study for my teams. I'm not going to say that it's at all, laboratory accurate. But for me as a practical manager, I do monitor the progress. I monitor these things in my team. And what I found was that when my team started working longer than 10 hours a day, when they were in the office longer than 10 hours a day, I was getting zero increase in actual output. And I have my own theories on that. My pet theory that has worked for me as far as being able to think about it in a way that inspired solutions to alternate things was when you have already resigned yourself to being working in an office for a long day, then you're not working as quickly. You're not hurrying as much. You're not working as effectively. And so I instituted a stop time. You need to be done by this time because no one's allowed to be in the office after a certain period. And so we instituted this. It kind of conflicted with other areas like open work hours and whatnot, but it did end up dialing in the team to where it was, I want to get 7 hours of effective labor out of you. And I want you to do that in an 8-hour day. I don't want you doing that in a 16-hour day. And by effective hours, I mean not your email reading time, not your meeting time, not this time, not that. I want to get 30 to 35 really effective hours of work out of you. And since I can't legally bind you to more than 40 hours, but I know that you're going to be in the office more than 40 hours because that's the culture in which we are, I'd like to at least get 30 to 35 hours of work out of a person. So how do you do this? Well, it's not a measure of how many hours you're in the office. So what I did find was that when I modified the environment a little bit, particularly making sure you have the proper snacks, preferably healthy snacks, which was an interesting notion. Healthy snacks versus unhealthy snacks. More expensive, but really, if you're going to split hairs over costs of what snacks you're going to have in the office, my environment did not have to worry about that. We were able to be profitable enough where we weren't splitting those kinds of hairs. So the snacks in the office, being healthy, being good. I mean, we had the refrigerators, we had everything that we needed so that we could have that there. And it became just part of the culture that the environment was that way. We did have a couple of negative run-ins in environment that we couldn't control anything about. We went to an open floor plan, which modern studies are showing exactly the same studies in the 50s that said that open floor plans were a bad idea are still a bad idea. But they are cost effective and they work very well for that. So you can get a lot more people shoved into a smaller space. Absolutely effective. And collaboration is great, but collaboration doesn't equate to output. So neither output quality or output volume. So you're trading off these things. But I had to go and I go and I look at these things, and understanding how you're measuring productivity allows you to make the case for the benefits of productivity. For example, I mean, it has to be tied to productivity or it's not going to get executive championship. You want to make changes in your culture, you want to make changes in your environment, then you really need to do this in a way that an executive can buy in on. An executive is going to buy in on whatever's profitable. I mean, let's be realistic. The world of larger companies is there's the level of management that's in charge of the individual people. And so for them, their people and their happiness and their effectiveness and their output is of paramount. Then there's the level at the top who are responsible, especially if you're in a venture capitalist environment. If you're dealing with venture capital, look, profitability is key. You're going to be measured by the money you bring in, the dollar signs. That's what matters. Often in the larger section, there's going to be somebody in between that negotiates between well-being and profitability and tries to find a way to maximize both while balancing those levers. So if you're involved in wanting to make changes to how you're going to pay somebody or how you're going to have the structure work, you're going to need to have the guys that are at the top making those calls and dialing in the dollars and designating how dollars get spent. You have to get them on board. To get them on board, you have to go to their value accountability stream, which is actual profitability. So productivity in a way that can be directly tied to profitability, actually, and in a way that can be measured there, aligned to the social interactions, social behaviors you want to see manifested, will actually allow you to build a system where you can actually create measurements and hold managers accountable to taking care of their teams in the way that you want to see that done. But you have to draw that connection. If you don't draw that connection, then there's no impetus other than, a moral prerogative that is entirely in the hands of whether that particular executive has that as part of their moral fiber or not. And that's tough. So you got to get that, you got to make that case, and you got to make that case clearly, and then you got to measure and demonstrate that the case is actually netting results. Because when you demonstrate the net results, then it gets preserved, maintained, and expanded on. And that's the difference. That's what's key. Last piece. Recent studies are showing that people are working at places for shorter and shorter hours, or shorter and shorter time periods. 1 to 2 years, you job hop. Job hopping is a big problem. Now, I have a theory this is only a problem until you start having kids, and then you start needing to settle down to be able to take care of, getting some stability while you've got the problems there. But I don't have any data to back that up. That's just my own subjective experience. When my employees start having kids, that's when they want to settle down and stay at a place for a long time. Okay. That's if people aren't going to be staying longer than a year, it makes it really hard to make the case to invest in their well-being, to invest in their betterment. Now, there's of course the case where we invest in the culture, we make the culture one of good well-being, and in so being, while we have this culture of well-being, anybody who comes in is going to benefit, and then there's going to be a greater chance that they stay. I mean, sure, we can make that case, but we're talking about investment, where we are actively needing to invest either money, time, or both into these people that, that's a cost. That is a cost to the company. And so it comes off one half of the balance sheet. It needs to have a result that produces the other half, preferably at a positive ROI, if not a ROI multiplier. So, how do we engage there when we have this short-term benefit? That's something that we really need to consider. That's actually the one that has me the most concerned when it comes to looking at the future, is that if this becomes a norm, that we're just never going to have long-term career paths anymore. What's the motivation to invest in anybody short term? I mean, I would not manage anyone that I know is going to be gone in 9 months the same way that I would manage somebody that I think is going to stay, has the potential to stay for years. If they're going to stay for years, I'm going to invest heavily in their career path. I'm going to invest heavily in getting them and seeing what we can get from them and actually educating them and building them and testing them and finding ways to grow and investing in their growth. I'm going to do that if they're going to be there a while. If they're not going to be there longer than 9 months, a year, I'm going to use them. I'm not going to invest. I'm not going to do something where I go and I put money in. It doesn't make sense. They will get the benefits of the side effect that happens to the entire team, but it's really hard to make the case in a reasonable way to understand where the benefit there is. And it sounds cold and calculating and unfeeling, and I know that, and I don't like that. But it also, investing in your team requires a tremendous, for me at least, requires a tremendous emotional investment as well. And if that emotional investment is only one directional, then that's not good for my well-being. And I have to balance that too. So these are some thoughts. These are just a larger exploration about some of the challenges around why we don't see more of this. The big focus points again. A, we don't select for these qualities in managers. If we do, then we have a greater chance at getting those managers and getting those qualities manifested in more and more people. Instead, we select for efficacy in a given individual contributor role, and so it's all about the work rather than about the people. So there's one. Number two, you have to tie the benefit of the investment of money and time into the results of the gained productivity, and or whatever your selling point is, whatever it is you're saying is going to be, we're going to get more. I mean, maybe it's better retention numbers. I don't know. Whatever your situation is, but you need to demonstrate A, that there is a correlation, and B, that over time the correlation is actually resulting in positive results. It's that secondary half that makes the long-term investment beyond just a year happen. And it's those long-term investments that build the culture and build the environment to what we want to see. 5 years down the road, you can get amazing things that way. But if you don't have the correlation, and if you don't show the cause and effect, and you don't show the outcome as being positive, why invest? You still have to demonstrate results, just like everybody else. Third, that short term, and I don't know the solution to that. The short term work environment is tough, and I just don't know what to do about that yet. But we'll figure it out. It's what we do. So I just wanted to give those extra pieces. HR guys, again, thank you so much for all the work you do. I owe you guys for multiple things that I've done in the past, and I really want to and I hope this helps. I hope this provides some kind of insight. So, that's it. I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.